Hi, this is Joseph Gregory Hallett. It is Tuesday, the 29th of August 2023. I've made some notes. Looks like this, and that got turned into this, and this, and this, and this, just to get clarification on what's been going on in the alternative media, which appears to be heavily sabotaged. Truthers are targeted individuals, and the British Army 77th Brigade is targeting those telling the truth and supporting those who aren't telling the truth but pretending to be truthers. And this is in answer to, in addition to, I made an interview on the 31st of July 2023 called Mark of the Beast, which was about Mark Windows, who's also Mark Craethorne, Mark Windsor, and Mark Alexander Scott. And he replied on the 8th of August 2023, a week later, or 9 days later, which was his birthday. And I'm now replying on the 29th of August. Would have been earlier, but I had some editing to do. So I'm going to begin by reading first of 4 pages. Mark Windows is a corporate saboteur, and this cost him about £70,000 for dissing me. Mark Windows didn't deny his girlfriend was on Britain's 10 most wanted list for grievous bodily harm, and Mark Windows admitted to stealing Greg Hallett's hard drive. Mark Windows got my books off his hard drive and sold them on Amazon, then criticised my books, but he was using old PDFs from 2006 and 2007. Mark Windows has never offered to return the hard drive or return money for the books. This is identity theft, the same as what Dave Mahoney did, identity theft. Only catch and release people say catch and release doesn't exist. There are 150,000 catch and release in England, plus another 42,000 in Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Wales. The UK has a population of 67 million. England has 56 million, Scotland has 5.5 million, Wales has 3.1 million, Northern Ireland has 2 million, Southern Ireland has 5.1 million, so 56 million plus 15.7 million equals 71.7 million. Now that was in June 2021, so now it would be about 72 million. Let's call it 72 million. Catch and release is Jesuit controlled. It is the Jesuit army. This Jesuit army's role is to ensure nothing gets out that is the truth. All truth is to be sabotaged, corporate sabotage. All truthers are to be sabotaged. Mark Windsor is a gypsy who thinks he's a Michelin Jew. Just look at him, he's a traveller. After his corporate sabotage, murder attempt, thefts and plagiarism and fraud, Mark Windsor went on the run in England and Wales for 7 years with no fixed abode, sleeping out in his white van and couch surfing. And Mark Windows uses projection, and then he said that I'd been doing this. It's not the case. The bald gypsy Mark Windsor then escaped to Bulgaria in an MI5 safe house with no known address. Mark Windsor is sociotypal and secretly a sociopath who wants to destroy all non-gingers who are taller than him and don't have a mental illness. So this excludes Nick Colostrum, who is spectrum with Asperger's syndrome, or is that Asperger's? Trouble with social skills, obsessive focus on one topic, perform the same behaviour over and over again, all very noticeable when eating starters. You have to make allowances for Nick Colostrum socially. The sociotypal and secret sociopath Mark Windsor then accused myself of everything he had done. This is called projection. Mark accused me of couch surfing, but in 8 years I've only spent 2 nights on a couch and have lived in the same address for over 8 years, except for 1 year when I was invited to live with some new friends. Mark Windsor admitted to all of the accusations made in Mark of the Beast on the 31st of July 2023 and did not deny any of them. The fictional Mark Windows has been fronting for his ever-changing identity as Mark Craethorne, Mark Windsor, and Mark Alexander Scott, all very real British agents. In his approximately 8th of August 2023 podcast, Great Conspiracy Hoaxes, Greg Hallett and the Hidden King, Mark Windows projects that what he does, his many faults, from his faulted personality to cover up for his corporate sabotage. Remember your Mossad training, Mark. Attack is the best form of defense, and audacity, audacity, audacity. Mark Windows was fronting as Mark Windsor, admitting that it was his role to destroy the Hidden King of England 5-book series. Even Portuguese intelligence knew Mark Windows was a British agent working for some form of government. The 2IC of Portuguese intelligence told me this over a birthday dinner. Here, Mark Windsor even confirmed he had stolen the 4 terabyte hard drive, which I've previously said was 4.5 terabytes, but claimed it was given to him for safekeeping. This is contradicted by me asking if Mark Windows had the hard drive repeatedly, followed by his denials from Mark Windows, all in line with Mark Windsor's corporate sabotage. 2. Stop the project moving forward, steal the data, make sure the targeted individual spends all his money and gets nothing for it, ensure the targeted individual is depleted of all resources and no further ahead and even further behind. If you do an interview with the targeted individual, delay the interview and then talk over him, which is what Mark Windows did. Mark Windsor, being an agent of the British government, namely British Army 77th Brigade, his admission is by sniggering, rotten persona as bad as the corporate saboteurs Just Tiz and M-Seeker of Truth, who worked for the Mossad's Charlie Ward and Dave Mahoney, who's actually David George O'Mahony, with no E, getting others in as distraction like Nick Colostrum and Will Rowlands, who didn't know the target of an individual, nor of him until the day before, and getting in assistance to lie on command in exchange for digging Will Rowlands out of obscurity with no address provided for any of them, and Nick Colostrum lying on command, and it all comes down to a glass of orange juice. Mark Windsor uses the same methods as the catch and release agents and corporate saboteurs Dave Mahoney and his assets, the two worst personas in Britain, Just Tiz and M-Seeker of Truth, or M for Midget or M for MI5, copied by Mark Windows. Mark Windsor changed his name from Mark Craethorne, a nobody, to Mark Windsor in 2004, the same year as the Northern Bank robbery that funds corporate sabotage for counterintelligence in the alternative media, targeting people actually telling the truth, especially about the British royal family, which is flat lie royal, and illegitimate many times over in the last 440 to 457 years. This is the elephant in the living room. The late 2004 Northern Bank robbery used the Elephant family to launder money. The Elephant family was created just prior by Mark Shand, who was Camilla Parker Bowles' brother until he was killed 10 years later outside the Gramercy Park Hotel in New York on the 23rd of April 2014. The Northern Bank robbery on the 20th of December 2004 was done by Camilla Parker Bowles' ex-husband, Brigadier Andrew Henry Parker Bowles, and his business partner Ted Cunningham, who was convicted of the robbery 5 years later in 2009 and served 5 of 10 years, had to repay £3.03 million, and Prince Charles changed the laws in Ireland and got him off the last 5 years. Ted Cunningham's 33-year-old son, Timothy Cunningham, pleaded guilty to 4 charges of laundering Northern Bank cash and had to return tens of thousands of pounds. A TV series was then made that first screened on BBC One on the 3rd of May 2021 called Heist, the Northern Bank Robbery. This was a cover-up ensuring that none of the truth was highlighted, all of the truth was obfuscated, and none of the true story got out. I.e. that Prince Charles covered it up because it was his soon-to-be wife Camilla Parker Bowles' ex-husband, his business partner, and his son, and her brother, Camilla's brother, were all involved. This was the biggest bank robbery in UK history, £26.5 million, with £3 million returned, leaving £23.5 million to launder through the Elephant family to fund corporate sabotage, especially in the alternative media where the catch and release work for free. So they don't have to serve their sentence. They're charged and sentenced, but they don't have to serve the sentence as long as they bear false witness. Two of Osama bin Laden's brothers gave Elephant family £1 million each, with Charles and Camilla being the royal patrons, so able to spend this on corporate sabotage, especially in the alternative media, where the catch and release work for free to protect the British royal family from being exposed as flatline royal and bank robbers. 99.5% of the video creators and podcasters claiming to be truthers are actually corporate saboteurs protecting the British royal family and other corrupt assets. As an example, I wrote a 5-volume set called The Hidden King of England, exposing that Queen Victoria had a secret firstborn son, Victoria's Secret. Then the truther corporate saboteurs ignore this and counteract with Queen Victoria was a man. She wasn't. She had 9/11 children. She had Prince Marcos Manuel, 9 official children, and then another child, Louise Brown, to John Brown. This stops the public finding out in the correct way that the British royal family have been illegitimate for the last 440 years, if not 457 years. Since Prince James Charles, or Prince Charles James, died at 2.5 days old and was replaced by John Forbes, then John Erskine, then cousin Thomas Erskine, then James Maitland, then 6 others who were killed by the Jesuit servant of no name or parentage, who then became King James II King James I of Britain, Brittaine, and not England, and was never crowned King James VI of Scotland nor King of Scots, and was never King of England. This commoner Jesuit servant usurped the position of Sir Walter Raleigh, whom the non-King James VI jailed in the Tower of London 6 days prior to coronation for 13 years. That's my ancestor. Mark Windsor did not address any of this because it's true. Rather, Mark Windsor created a distraction like, Greg has a big ego, whereas Mark Craethorne is a little plump, bald, suicidal ginger gypsy with spray-on hair. This is where you laugh. Never married, no children, no house, no formal education except a 1-month journalism certificate for how to lie publicly and build up a miasma, a disease of the ear, and changed his name from Mark Craethorne to Mark Windsor to Mark Alexander Scott, as though he had discovered the North Pole and the South Pole and was the hero of everywhere, which is why he doesn't publicly use that name, Mark Alexander Scott. Ashamed of his super ego, he fronted as Mark Windows, which comes up as a dirty name everywhere. You can't find Mark Windows for all the ads trying to get rid of him. But Mark Windows is a suicidal ginger gypsy, coke addict, street magician turned policeman's friend, so dobbing people in, who stole Greg Hallett's 4-terabyte hard drive and admitted to this on the 8th of August 2023, the same day Mark Craethorne turned 60, and Mark Windsor turned 19, and Mark Alexander Scott turned 8. Mark Craethorne, Mark Windsor, Mark Alexander Scott, fronting as Mark Windows, also stole another £4,000 for a Mercedes van, another £4,000 worth of books, sold me a dangerous vehicle that cost me over £2,000, and from the 4-terabyte hard drive, stole my books and sold them on Amazon, now worth many more thousands. Corporate sabotage. Mark Craethorne, Windsor, Alexander Scott, Windows, fronting as Mark Windows, was selling Greg Hallett's books, my books, from old PDFs dated 2006 and 2007, where I have other versions from 2011 and 2013 that I don't seem to be able to get on Amazon, as though it's all a counterintelligence operation, counterintelligence corporate sabotage setup, which it is. Mark Craethorne, Windsor, Alexander Scott, frontiers Mark Windows, said something to the effect that he would sue me if I made these accusations again. Well, here I am doing just that. I look forward to discovery of a British Army 77th Brigade counterintelligence corporate saboteur agent and the alliances, methods and tech at his disposal. Mark Craethorne, Windsor, Alexander Scott, fronting as Mark Windows, appears to be in the UK, but is in fact in Bulgaria, the only place he could afford to live after his possessed coke addict girlfriend, Diwama Rani, also known as Elena and Boop, extorted him for £70,000 for driving her to and from their grievous bodily harm stabbings of women in shopping malls in the south of England, then taking her to the Harlequin Festival near Sandringham House that day or the next day, then escaping her out of the UK in his van, then having Lord Ashcroft appear before his judge and remove her off Britain's 10 most wanted list based on that she was no longer in the country. Mark Windows runs Nick Colostrum, an MI5 agent or asset who lies when required. He lies on call. June 2010, I gave a talk at King's Cross St Pancras Tube railway station in London. Nick Colostrum said he walked out of my talk on the 8th of August 2023, he said that. But actually, the third floor conference room was free as long as they bought drinks. Nick Colostrum bought his own orange juice, and when the waiter came in, Nick said he had his own drink and wouldn't buy one. The waiter then invited him outside when Nick Colostrum got the entire group kicked out of that great location forevermore. This is Asperger's or Asperger's. He also forgot the connector cable so my Mac wouldn't link to the screen. All the attendees were single-issue agents handpicked by Mark Windows, all agents of some sort, and the Jewish one had her legs crossed and kept kicking my tripod, so the camera shook every 2 seconds. They're all a sack of dicks and worse than useless too. So, I found this today, and it is more or less an affidavit from the 6th of July 2016. Question mark Windows. Is it really worth exposing an agent? You can tell a government agent when your truth work is being sabotaged in favour of the government and their agenda. Such was the case with Mark Windows. Not noticed at first, but it definitely became noticed when the pattern repeated. Mark Windows has been increasingly controlled by truth sabotage forces and ultimately by a 5-foot knife-wielding, insane Asian coke addict, drug-dealing, hardcore sex addict who took total control of Mark Windows, seemingly with increasingly meek consent that ended up in total controlled submission. The code word appeared to be babe. There's the question of whether you write this down or do a video podcast or leave it totally alone, unrecorded, there being nothing to win except perhaps to show others how agents operate and which paradigm they operate by. There's the question of whether anyone will listen, whether they'll change their behavior towards the government agent, or whether they already knew. In Mark Windows' case, 8 out of 10 people whom I met that knew him already considered him to be a government agent that could cite specific behaviors illustrating this. It's almost as though I was the last to know. That would mean I was the target. Nevertheless, here's the story of how Mark Windows operates to reduce the efforts of those to tell the truth and get it out there. 1. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. Enemies is the target. 2. Say one thing and achieve the exact opposite. 3. When the project is about to reach fruition, sabotage. 4. Sabotage the outcome, interviews, production, means of finance. 5. Promote the opposite story. 6. Well, no, sorry, that's it. So here's how it went down in several parts. I met Mark Windows at a talk at the King's Cross St Pancras railway station in London in June 2010. 20 minutes after the talk, he said, "I trust you totally," which may be a standard government line aimed to keep the target voluntarily closer. We did some crucial work where Mark filmed me delivering the letter to 10 Downing Street on the 2nd of August 2010, claiming the change over the monarchy, which resulted in the change to the laws of succession in 2014, backdated to the 25th of April 2013, which is Prince Marcos Manuel's birthday, and the same day I was registered in the Holy See as a member of the Rex Deus family. In March 2012, I invited Mark Windows to come down to Portugal to film myself and Francisco revealing the royal objects given by Queen Victoria. Mark Windows arrived for 6 days around the 20th of March and began filming. Francisco and I were both poisoned for the middle 3 days, such that only the initial half day and a rather sick recovering last day were filmed. Mark Windows or not, there was sabotage going on. Mark Windows is prime suspect. In August, or his known accomplice or unknown accomplice. In August 2012, I left a new printer and suit at Mark's in London. Returning in March 2015, the printer was sabotaged and the suit was given to charity a couple of weeks before I returned. It was a 600 quid suit. Little things, but printing out a story, notes or speech and wearing a suit in an interview can make all the difference. But here's the latest story, the clincher with telltale timing. After 5 years, 2010 to 14, I finished the 5-volume series of The Hidden King of England and received the hard copies on the 18th of August 2014. Almost immediately, Mark Windows was targeted by a 5-foot-tall, knife-wielding Nepalese coke addict, drug-dealing, hardcore sex addict who was trained with a Gurkha dagger and is the daughter of a British Army general who was a Gurkha and lives in Nepal. Her daughter and brother-in-law live in England. Mark Windows' new girlfriend was working for the British Army, likely motivating the 77th Brigade sleepers, and was increasingly ensuring that Mark Windows was activated for the British Army 77th Brigade and her outcomes in the best interests of the British military. This stance was all pro the fake British Queen. The more fake she was, the better chance they had of exercising war. So Mark Windows was now working for the opposition, for war, for the military, and for the fake monarchy to attack all truthers that revealed the fakery. This would fit in with his real name change from Mark Craethorne, 2 different spellings, to Mark Windsor. Now, I operate on suspended belief or suspended disbelief and often give the benefit of the doubt until something concrete shows up. Something concrete did turn up. The one that clinched it removed all suspicion and put all things in the realms of undeniability. I arrived from Lisbon to London at midday on the 1st of March 2015. It had been arranged that Mark Windows would pick me up and we'd go straight to Westminster Abbey to do some filming where I would claim the status of Prince Pretender to the throne and crown of the United Kingdom as per the legal documents developed over the previous 6 months. Mark didn't show up and it was someone else who told me it would be a no-show. I ended up staying with a friend in the very south of London, then travelled to Hereford and stayed there for 6 weeks in a castle. The initial launch plans thwarted. Actually, I'd stayed in the castle before. I was actually in a cottage outside the castle with the previous owner. These initial launch plans were thwarted in Portugal, August 2014 to February 2015, then thwarted again in the UK from March to August 2015, so thwarted for a year. And what was not happening with Mark Windows was part of the overall non-happening, suspended, delayed, and non-release of this information, which exposed Queen Elizabeth II as a complete, utter, and total fraud, as was the case with her grandfather and great-grandfather. George V was illegitimate. He was the son of Tsar Alexander III of Russia, and Edward VII was the son of Baron Nathan Rothschild. Baron Lionel Nathan Rothschild. After and Baron Lionel Nathan Rothschild, and Edward VII was also the father of Winston Churchill, and Winston Churchill was actually the sperm donor for Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Margaret. After arriving into Hereford near Wales on the 3rd of March 2015, Mark Windows turned up to Hereford with his Asian Nepalese girlfriend Niwama Rani for 6 days from the 5th to the 11th of March 2015, and there were no interviews, not even the offer of an interview. Rather, Mark just wanted to shoot videos of doing stupid things, which I avoided. From Hereford to the 7th to 10th of April 2015, I lodged the 650-page documents in the Worcester High Court claiming the Prince Pretender status, etc. 10th to the 12th of April 2015, from a friend of my host, I arranged by phone to buy a Mazda Estate 2004, silver, black leather, 2 sunroofs, all extras, very tidy and presentable for the price of £500. I even took it for a test drive and it was a real goer. With insider timing, Mark Windows rang up 2 hours later as though the call had been intercepted, with his own offer for me to buy his 2002 red van. The timing was immaculate, as if he was an agent targeting his friend, which is the targeted individual, they call it friend, with a vehicle that was a death trap. So, as if he was an agent targeting his friend with a vehicle that was a death trap and a financial bomb. This was that timing. Mark Windows' offer was to talk up his red van. Quote, "It's a great van. I wouldn't sell it to you with anything wrong with it. I want to buy it back." End quote. Monday, 12th, 13th of April 2015, Mark Windows then drove the 4 hours from North London to Hereford to pick me up so I could buy the red van. But he didn't turn up in the red van he was selling, but a white van he'd recently purchased. Without Mark stating the reason, Mark avoided bringing the red van because it was a death trap, and the whole van shook on braking, and anyone who sat in the van wouldn't buy that van. His white van was parked about 30 yards from where I was staying. Around 8:30 at night, his girlfriend walked to mine and said, "Mark says I'm an interdimensional shit demon." I didn't say anything, but I had my suspicions, and as it later turned out, all three of us were right. It was no secret, and we all became aware of this. So there is no sighting the red van, and there is no test drive, just a ride to his place in North London, Walthamstow, by which time things would be more or less committed. This was because the red van had so much wrong with it, and whenever you pushed the brakes, the van shook left and right and backwards and forwards with such shuddering it was damaging the alignments and tore a 9-inch gash in the chassis. It's a bit longer than that. So it was a potential death trap, and if that didn't work, it was a financial bomb waiting its next MOT due 3 months away on the 3rd of August and costing almost the price of the van again. Since November 2014, I'd sent a 3 terabyte hard drive back up to Europe for storage. It arrived there damaged, it couldn't be used. In February 2015, I sent a 2 terabyte hard drive backups. I sent two 2 terabyte hard drive backups to Europe, and one arrived working and one didn't. I then had a 4 terabyte hard drive for myself with only half of my information backed up elsewhere in Europe. Late on the 14th of April 2015, we arrived in North London, and the next day I went straight to London International Book Fair at Olympia Grand in South London. It was at this time that my 4 terabyte hard drive went missing from inside Mark Window's home. On the 16th of April 2015, we all went up to a talk in Halesworth in East Anglia and ended up staying the night. The people around were intuitives, and it was amazing the amount of dislike people had for Mark Windows and his girlfriend Niwama Rani Ilana or Boop, who was starting to show her true colours as an interdimensional shit demon. Actually, we're not kidding, and nor was anyone else. I was then driven around England from Beccles to Birmingham, Newcastle, Wales, and down to Brighton Way for a couple of weeks and rested up there. I saw the red van for the first time in daylight. What a mess. It had green and brown mould all over the roof and much of the sides. It was a complete tip inside with many empty beer cans, and someone had tried to break in, forcing the side door lock in. I found the MOT form and the MOT to-do list and pointed this out. Mark Windows ran his finger down the list and said, "Yes, all this has been done." Later, I pointed to the MOT to-do list, and without looking at each individual point of the list, Mark Windows said, "That's all been taken care of." I drove the red van for the first time. Excuse me. The first braking was uphill and didn't appear so bad. The second braking, the van shuddered left and right and rattled. I asked Mark Windows sitting next to me, and he said, "That's easy to fix. I have a mechanic who will do it for £40. The mechanic's name was never offered. When asked later, Mark said he'd moved to France. The brake shutter quote was actually £200 as of the 13th of August 2015. I left that night in the red van to Hever Castle, Rotherfield, and near Brighton, where 3 people told me Mark Windows was an agent, and one of them adding very specific stories, and another pointedly saying, "Mark Windows works for the other side." Even Mark Windows' previous girlfriend Lynn said, "Mark Windows said, 'Watch this, I'm going to destroy Greg.'" End quote. "Watch this, I'm going to destroy Greg." End quote. Mark Windows was selling his house, so a few of us turned up for a goodbye drink on Friday, Saturday, 12th and 13th of June 2015, which was just before the Magna Carta 800 years anniversary. At 2 a.m, Mark's Nepalese girlfriend gets on one. Recognizing obvious madness, I leave and go to the van about 50 yards in front of the house. Dinner stayed till about 4 a.m, then caught the night bus for an hour home as he couldn't stand their violent noise anymore. I returned at 8:30 a.m, and Mark stumbles out at 9:30 a.m. and told me his girlfriend Elena Niwamarani really is an interdimensional shit demon and has been standing over him all night with a knife, actually aimed at his face and neck and chest. with a knife, so he hasn't slept, and she had cut her arm quite deeply, but it hadn't bled. We then sit in the garden, and after about an hour, the interdimensional shit demon comes out of Mark Window's house and starts yelling at him while hiding from me. I and Mark spent the rest of the day gathering up Niwama Rani's relatives, brother-in-law and daughter, to arrange for Niwama Rani to be sectioned, as she was clearly insane. The daughter was crying as they'd been trying to get Niwama Rani into anger management for years, even a decade. Mark then told me she showed him photos of her on a hardcore free sex website for gangbangs, and that night Niwama Rani was openly admitting to being a £500 a week coke addict. So she was a wrong'un. At 4:45 on Saturday, Mark Windows, perhaps through lack of sleep, couldn't make up his mind to section Niwama Rani, so released the brother-in-law back home and went inside for some sleep. Thereafter, on the 13th of June 2015, the insane interdimensional shit demon Niwama Rani has been controlling Mark Windows on behalf of the British military. This is actually how it goes down. 3 months later, on the 3rd of August 2015, it was over £501.25 to get the MOT. It was £501.25 to get the MOT. Contrary to what Mark Windows said, nothing on the MOT to-do list had been done, plus there was work to do, including welding the chassis, and the quote for fixing the brake shuttering was another £200 on top. In fact, to fix everything for the MOT to-do list and to get an MOT was £1,000, so it was £501 for the MOT and another £500 to fix all the other stuff, which is twice the price of the van in 3.5 months. So it's gone up from being a 500 quid van, 550 quid van, to 1,550. Actually, I think it was 1,200, 1,750. It's about 2,000 in all. Mark Windows wanted $500 or £500 or £600 for the van, and I paid him £550. First £300 in Wales, then £250 in Walthamstow, so £550 was paid, and the first MOT was £501.25. This means the van is still up for dispute. This would have been done, except Mark Windows has been in hiding ever since, recognising this was a murder attempt of a targeted individual. I've heard on the grapevine that Mark Windows wants to sell the video footage he took of us in Portugal in March 2012 for a six-figure sum, the same time we were poisoned, but he can't use it because he doesn't have either of our permission, not one, not both. It's all a shame, really. It has delayed the project by several years and tainted it with the madness of the British military, British intelligence, and counterintelligence use. British intelligence and counterintelligence use mad people, insane people, and borderline people just functioning in society to target projects and truths to delay or alter their outcomes so they won't see the light of day in the way they should. So that's been a huge success for them. In this way, Mark Windows has been a very successful agent of the British military and government, who are doing their utmost to maintain the fake Queen on the throne. Mark Windows changed his name by, well, actually what she did was she married me by proxy on 18th of March 2017, which was 2 years later. And Mark Windows changed his name by deed poll from Mark Craethorne, or Mark Craethorne, two different spellings, to Mark Windsor in 2004, the same year as the Northern Bank robbery, and in Monmouth on Friday the 10th of April 2015 from Mark Windsor to Mark Alexander Scott. We left to go to London to see the red van later on the night of Monday the 13th of April 2015, but only saw it on the first time on Tuesday afternoon. Mark Windows stated the van had done 69,000 miles. It had done 81,200 miles. He was required to do an oil change and did not do that. All the tyres were unwarrantable and one of them blew out on the motorway. It was a dangerous vehicle and a death trap. Mark Windsor was fully aware of this. So, here is his address here. And I might be able to see it better there. There. And yeah, it says there. This is a dangerous vehicle. Warning, in my opinion, the vehicle is dangerous to drive because of defects marked as such on the failure and or advisory documents. Here's the failure document there, and here's the advisory document there. So Mark Windows was selling me a dangerous vehicle knowingly, and then he hid that document. So I only found it in the big pouch full of all other documents much later. Anyway, so that's Corporate Sabotage by Mark Windsor, and we have to go. All the best.